Hey guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here to talk about an episode of Superman the Animated Series titled Fun and Games. By now, you know the drill. I'll quickly sum up the episode and give plenty of spoilers while doing so before I get into my thoughts on the episode. Some bank robbers think that they've made a clean getaway when a creepy man wearing a Howdy Doody mask gives them an ominous warning to give to their boss Bruno Mannheim, a member of the Metropolis criminal underworld. As he departs, he leaves a weaponized bouncy ball that almost kills them, if not for the timely intervention of Superman. Later, this self-proclaimed toy man strikes again at the park where Mannheim is about to give a speech. After Lois Lane writes an article condemning the Toyman as a narcissistic maniac, the Toyman kidnaps her to give her his side of the story. We find out he's the son of a man Mannheim betrayed and left to die in prison. When the Toyman once again tries to get his revenge on Mannheim, Superman once again interferes, saving Lois and Mannheim, but unfortunately allowing for Toyman to escape. Cue credits. There were actually two different versions of Toyman they could have gone with in this episode at this time, but while they used the name of the original Toyman, Winslow Schott, they pretty much completely redesigned him from the ground up, and I'm really glad that they did. The original design for Toyman was a man in a green suit with a big bow tie, which just does not look very menacing. Sure, you could argue that he isn't meant to look menacing, and that lures his victims into a false sense of security, but I kinda like that even when you're not sure who you're dealing with, as soon as you see him, you know something's not right. And the Jester design from Super Friends never really worked for me either, also because it just does not look that terrifying, and it makes very little sense to boot. With this new look, Toyman almost looks like he could fit right in Gotham City, and I don't mind that at all. With Metropolis having a bad part of town called Suicide Slum, and evil gangsters like Bruno Mannheim, it's not the shining bright utopia that a lot of creators sometimes portray it as, so having some weird creepy guys like Toyman populating the streets does not bother me in the least. As far as Toyman's motivations, I like them. I like that we get a bait and switch on just who Toyman is near the climax of the episode. For a while, we're thinking it's somebody with more of a history with Mannheim. Then, when Toyman shows Lois the book explaining his backstory, I'm sure I wasn't the only one thinking Toyman was the toy maker that Mannheim stabbed in the back. Mannheim himself even thought it was his old business partner. You might call foul on young Schott having the same voice as his dad, enough to fool Mannheim, but I think it works. I've answered the phone before, and close relatives thought that I was my dad, so it doesn't seem that far-fetched to me. One reason I suspect we didn't see more of Toyman in this series is the thing that really makes him work more than his redesign and motivations is the different ways he turns toys into weapons. You wouldn't want to see Toyman revert to some kind of weapon that he's used before, and eventually, I suspect it would be hard to find ways to make a Slinky or a teddy bear seem really deadly. This episode does that very nicely with the bouncy ball and the Play-Doh, but I suspect that would have been more and more difficult to do every time they reused him, much like how the same crew realized the Riddler was very difficult to write intelligent riddles for in Batman the Animated Series. So while I do understand why they may not have wanted to use the character many more times for fear of him getting stale, it does make me wonder why the character of Toyman, who failed to kill Mannheim, wouldn't strike again in a week or two. What's to stop him from trying again? For that matter, since we didn't see Toyman again until this series' third season, what exactly was he doing with his time in between his appearances? Furthermore, his hatred of Mannheim is completely abandoned the next time we do see him. This reminds me a lot of how Batman the Animated Series would slightly reinvent villains each time they return, again so they wouldn't get stale. You don't want to see yet another episode where Scarecrow just uses fear toxin because we've already seen that, so he uses it to fix different sporting events. Just different enough, but still in his wheelhouse. But here, the next time we see Toyman, he becomes a creepy stalker, and then after that we see him in Justice League. First as part of the Superman Revenge Squad, angry at Superman for putting a halt to his criminal activities, and then later we see him as part of the Legion of Doom in Justice League Unlimited. But why? All this guy wanted to do was kill Mannheim, right? So why join Lex Luthor in a giant supervillain army? For that matter, even if Toyman was never able to get his revenge, slight spoilers for later episodes of this series, we do eventually see Mannheim get his comeuppance from Darkseid, so that should have put an end to Toyman's supervillain career, right? Well, apparently not. This is a little inconsistent, but it's not a problem in this episode, but rather later episodes in this series and in Justice League. Overall, I really did like this episode and the setup for a new interesting take on an older existing character, even if that setup was ignored later on. So that's all I have for this week. Come back next weekend where I will be discussing another episode of Superman the Animated Series, and come back during the week where I'll be talking about other things. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.